The board did meet a little while ago with representatives from the Kenton and the Campbell County Historical Society and the Barrington Crawford Museum, hoping that maybe sometime in the future we can do a collaboration and we might be able to solve our problem of space and I don't want to say, maybe even a way to display some things. But this is just the very first steps. We're just starting that. The Kiger trial, for those of you who weren't able to see it, the reenactment at the courthouse will be repeated at Shaven Library on the 22nd at 7 in the evening, and it is handicap accessible, which the old courthouse wasn't. Our November meeting will be farming in Boone County by a member of the Hempling family. The board doesn't have any recommendations right now. Does anyone have any matter of business they want to talk about? Okay, if not, I'm going to turn this over to Virginia. She's going to introduce our speaker.
It's good to be back and see you all again. Good to be walking. As you know, Pam Durstock was supposed to be our speaker, but she called me this morning and she had forgotten we had a meeting tonight, and she had moved away, and she had a closing at 6:30 at her new house, and so she said, well, she just didn't know what to do. Well, I must thank Sarah Maddox. She jumped into everything, and she got everything going for us, and she, bless her heart, I think she must have spent half the day, and she got our speaker, Jim Ison. We're very glad to have him step in. It's not easy always to step in at the last minute and get everything together now, and I'm talking just that he had just several hours to do this. So we have to really be thankful that he could be with us tonight. Jim Ison is the volunteer director of the Family Search Center in the John Parker Library at the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center in Cincinnati. He has authored Discover Your Family's History and Where in the World Are Your Ancestors for use in training family history consultants. He presented genealogy programs at Synergy, Federated Department Stores, Northern Kentucky University's Borderlands, the third conference, and at the Freedom Center's Genealogy Speakers Programs. He was a keynote speaker at the 205 Roots Simulcast in Oakland, California. He is a member of the Board of Trustees of the John Parker Historical Society. He has over 20 years of experience in genealogical research. He was a senior vice president for applications development at Provident Bank before it was acquired. And with that, we'll turn it over to Mr. Ison. Thank you.
Good evening. How are you all?
Good evening.
Did you notice in that short resume there how many years of genealogy experience she said I had? Over 20, exactly. Now, I don't know about you, but I've decided that anytime you have 20 years of experience, you don't have to count anymore. You just have to say over 20 years experience. But actually, I tell a story that I'm pre-microfilm. And for those of you who have researched in the census, you have some idea of what that means. My dad, when I was a young kid, would haul me off to the library, mostly because he worked about 60 hours a week, and when Saturday came, he wanted to go to the libraries to do research. Well, you might imagine that my mom was a little bit miffed at his party. She had this list of things that he ought to be involved in, and here he is running off to the library. And so in exasperation, she would yell at him, well, make sure you take Jim with you. So that was my introduction to family history. In all honesty, although my mother says she doesn't remember any such thing. But we live near Washington, D.C., and so on some of the weekends we would drive up to the archives, and at that point in time they would heft out the old books, and you would do your census searching through the books. So for those of you who have been on the computers and have done census research, you know what a marvelous age that we're living in to have that type of technology to assist us, so that things that used to actually take hours or weeks or months, we can find today in minutes, or at the very most, not much more than that. I've been asked to share with you some of the genealogy resources of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I'm a member of that church. There's approximately 10,000 members of the Mormon faith in the greater Cincinnati area. I think our two closest chapels are at Hebron, which is a relatively new chapel, and then on Buttermilk Pike. And in the Buttermilk Pike Chapel, we have a family history center. Just to help me kind of know what your experience is, by show of hands, how many of you have been to a family history center? Okay, a few of you have. So we'll talk a little bit about what a family history center is and how you can take advantage of family history centers, because each family history center is open to the public at no charge. The word free is really big in my vocabulary, and so I think you'll find family history centers to be a very attractive place to pursue family history. What I thought I would do is visit with you a little bit about the role of microfilming and what the church has been doing in microfilming. Today it's kind of an old technology, if you will, but in 1938 it was a brand new technology, and the L.D.S. Church was one of the leaders in the use of microfilming and saw its application in being able to record the world's records. And actually they have some big goals at times, and that is one of their goals, is to record all the records of the world, if you will. And when you think of some of the catastrophes that can occur, having a copy of your records is a pretty vital and an important thing, because usually a community has only one copy of its records, and if they're lost or damaged, well, then that becomes a irreplaceable asset that is not only lost to us, but lost to our children, to our posterity. So the LDS Church has been microfilming in over 110 countries, practically every county in the United States. And so when you think of the records that are in a courthouse of genealogical importance, you think of probate records, wills, estate papers, you think of deeds, land, property records. You think of perhaps vital records, your birth, your marriage, your death records. So all of these types of records have been, over the last 70-some years, have been in the process of being microfilmed. And at this point in time, over 2.5 million rolls of microfilm exist. And I'm told that's an equivalent of about 6 million large books. And you have access to every single one of them. You may not know that you had access, but you do. You have access to every single roll. So as you think about where your family came from and where you've been doing genealogical research, whether it's a courthouse in Pennsylvania or in South Carolina, or if it's a church in Germany where your family's records are, there's a very good chance that they've been microfilmed. And it's very, very easy to find out whether or not they have. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that. today. The other thing in today's family history centers is that you have free access to a website called Ancestry.com. Just by a show of hands, how many people have been out to Ancestry.com? Okay. Well, this is the most powerful site today in the world, from my perspective, in doing family history. And when you put the capability of the microfilming that's been done by the L.D.S. Church, plus what's available through the databases that Ancestry.com has produced, you have just a powerful capability to do research either within your home or within what? How far is the Buttermilk Pike building for most of you? It doesn't matter of a 5 or 10 or 15-minute drive. So that's kind of what I had in mind to talk to you. Is that what you want to hear about? If you do this, I'll keep talking.
Yes, keep doing it.
I'll wrap
That'd
it
be great.
up. Okay. You have a handout that has FamilySearch.org at the very top. FamilySearch.org is the LDS website for genealogical research. It is entirely free. Everything on it is free. You see that there is a search menu right there in the middle of the screen, and it's just about that simple to put in a name and click the search button to be on your way in searching over 1 billion names that are in repositories maintained by the L.D.S. Church.
Do you have any more of those? I don't have
I
a
do.
copy of those.
Excuse me a moment. Let me use these. Two in the back. So what you're going to, what you'll see at the very top, across this row right here on this screen, is you see home, search, share, and library. The three major functions that you perform on this site are search, share, and what's called library. And then you'll see a row underneath that from welcome, then it goes over to Go Family. I'll just highlight a couple of these particular capabilities. The search is what I would say the majority of people do on this site. You're going to find out that in some respects it's actually the lesser of the capabilities of this site, however. If you turn to the second page, you will see the kind of an expanded search for ancestors screen. And on the left side, you will see a column that begins with ancestor and then goes on down. These are the databases that the L.D.S. Church has, and I'll just spend a couple minutes with you identifying what some of these are. Ancestral File has about 30 million people listed in it. It's small in comparison, but what's unique about it is that it's linked generation to generation. So there's about a 20-year period where members of the LDS Church and others were invited to send in their pedigree, if you will, and then these were computerized. And so when you find somebody there, you may find 200 years of records in a particular family, or you may find 20. You're not exactly sure, but they're linked. Now, what you find with these databases is they're as good as the person who sent them in. So some of them are excellent, and some of them have been found to have errors in them. I don't know if you've seen errors in other people's genealogy work, but we all know that happens. The next record entry is called census. What they have there is they have the 1880 U.S. Census, and they have the 1881 British and 1881 Canadian census. Now, many of you know that the 1880 census is a powerful census, and we have this 20-year gap between 1880 and 1900 because of the loss of the 1890 census. Too bad we didn't have microfilming back then. But this is a free opportunity to get into the 1880 census, and it's an every name search. Those of you who have been around for a while know that at one time when you would use sound decks and that sort of thing, you had to have younger children to be able to find somebody in sound decks. Now every single name is indexed, so if all you know is a 2-year-old child, you can search on the 2-year-old child to try and find that family. So that's a pretty powerful capability. The largest database of all of them is the International Genealogical Index, and I hate saying that long set of words, so I always call it IGI, and I think most of the friends of International Genealogical Index end up calling it IGI. And it has several hundred million names in it. Now they're not linked. What they usually do is they will give you a person's name, tell you where the person was born, when they were born, and may tell you who their parents are, but it won't tell you who their grandparents are or their great-grandparents are. So it's a great place to do some, what I call global searching. If you're kind of, well, my people are from southern France, well, you can go in there and see what they put in your name and see what sort of entries there are from locations in southern France, and see if there are other people who have done research already and submitted that. Pedigree Resource is the newest of all the entries on this site. And it's one that I think you should be really aware of, because just as cities can be devastated, individual homes can be devastated as well. And some of us have spent a huge amount of time creating family histories, and maybe the only copy is on our computer or on our bookshelf or in our cabinet, and we don't want to be in that situation. If you submit your work to Pedigree Resource, a copy of it will end up in the Granite Vault in Utah, which I am told is about the safest place in the world to be. And I did this last December for the first time. And what happens is they share this. What you have to do is give them the right then to share it with the world. And so my entire genealogy is on CD 103. So if you go in and do a search, what you do is on any of my ancestors, it will come up with their name, and then it'll tell you that it's on CD 103. And in the Family History Centers, you can go get CD 103 and stick it in your computer, and you can see my family history. So I'm now networking, have the ability to network with practically the entire world as people come into Family History Centers or use FamilySearch.org. And that's something you want to do. You want people to know what research you've been working on, so you can share. You know, when you get back to the 5th, 6th, 7th great-grandparents, it's not all that easy sometimes to find the information, and other people might have information you don't know. The Social Security Death Index is a useful index, particularly for people who are getting started. The church also has a Family History Center in conjunction with the Freedom Center, with the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center. We call it the Family Search Center, and it's located in the John Parker Library on the 4th floor. It is also free to the public, even though if you're coming to tour the museum, you would have to pay the admission fee for that. If you're coming solely for the purpose of family history in our Family Search Center, you just call 333-7503 and you can make a free reservation. And we use this database quite frequently because many of the people who are coming in, we had a person today, she did not know the birthdays of her parents, of her grandparents. And as you're doing census research, it's a very useful thing to know what the birthday is of the people you're searching. So this database has everybody who has died since 1962 who received Social Security is in this database. And so we can, you know, if you have a lost cousin that you feel is, anybody you feel is deceased, and you have an idea of where they were living when they passed away, you'll be able to find them in this particular database. Okay. So FamilySearch.org is a great site for searching, and it's a great site for sharing your information with others. If we flip the page now, you're going to see a screen that says Family History Library Catalog. This is out of the Share tab, or out of the Library tab. And this is a catalog of all those 2.5 million films, plus about 300,000 books that are in the Family History Library in Salt Lake City. Now you can't, in these bars that are here, you can't read what's in the bars, but there are words in the bars, and the first bar has the word place. And probably when I do my searching, 95% of what I do on the Family History Catalog is using place. One of the bars also says surname. One of the bars also says title. So you can search on the titles of all the 300,000 books. You can search on surnames of family histories. But the films themselves, since they're films of courthouses or churches, they're set up by place. And so all you do is, somebody give me a county that you're interested in. You would be interested in researching.
Grant.
Is it Grant?
Grant County.
Grant County?
Grant.
I'm sorry,
G-R-A-N.
Grant County, Kentucky.
Yes.
Okay. So all you would do in the space, once you hit place, you're going to have a little entry to put in a name, and all you do is put in Grant. And what will come back is all the Grant counties and all the Grant cities in the United States or the world. And so you go down, and it's alphabetical, and you pick out Grant County, Kentucky. You click on it, and if you turn to the next page, Lori, was this yours?
This is mine, yes, lacrosse.
Okay, well, Lori picked lacrosse. And so here comes a list of just like a card catalog, of things that you can look at, from archives to vital records. Lori, how easy or difficult was it?
Oh, it's very easy. Very easy.
Very, very easy. So if you wanted to see, for instance, what birth, marriage, and death records had been microfilmed out of lacrosse, Wisconsin, you would then click on the vital links. There's a line on your computer screen for each one of these. You just click on the one that you're interested in, and you'll see what's been microfilmed. Once you see what's been microfilmed, you also find the film number for that. And once you find the film number, then you know you can bring that film number to the Buttermilk Pike Family History Center for $3.25, and you can use it for a month. Now, I happen to know that $3.25 doesn't even pay postage. So there isn't any better deal in the world. That's just about as free as can be. And you can see that through this archives through vital records, it's really covering the waterfront of pretty much all the records that you would want to look at. Now, it is untrue that the Mormons have microfilmed every record that exists in the world. That's their goal, if you will, but that's not what's happened. So if you don't find something in here, that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. That just means that it hasn't been microfilmed as yet. It may not exist. It may have been burned or destroyed in some manner, but we always tell people the fact that it's not here doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, and if that's a record that's important to you, well, then you want to call the county, or you want to go to another website to see if there are other records that will cover what you're looking for. It also looks like Lori has put in the name Hessen, and so you see another set of records. And the ones that I always get excited about are the ones that are right here in this corner where it says church records. I have had the good fortune of being able to search 300 years of one family line in Germany because they always stayed in the same church. When I took history, I can remember being taught what a serf was, but it didn't mean anything to me at the time. Now it's very important because that's what my ancestors were. They were basically serfs, and so they weren't allowed to leave the church, basically, or the Lord's domain. And so they were born and married and died generation after generation after generation for several hundred years. And all of those records have been microfilmed. I happen to use them at our chapel in Norwood, at the Family History Center in Norwood. And over a space of about 6 months, I was able to research that entire set of records. And so the power of being able to bring records to yourself is just immense. And if you haven't had that opportunity, you'll just be excited and thrilled when you're able to see your family records on these microfilms. Most of our centers have the ability to print anything you find. So then you take it home and you show it with the children, grandchildren, and siblings and family members, and they get excited. And it can also be a major part of your reunion as you share the actual documents themselves. Okay, so that's some of the current capability that you have through FamilySearch.org. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Ancestry.com is something that you can search, that you can use free from a family history center. You may be able to use it free from your public library as well, and you need to check your public library.
Boone County has it.
Okay.
We have Ancestry and Heritage Quest.
Heritage Quest. So you have choices as to where you go for using Ancestry.com. Now, when we took civics class, we remember that the Constitution prescribes that the nation must take a census every 10 years. And we may remember the reason why that existed. And we had that great debate as to between the large states and the smaller states, and it was finally decided that within our Congress we would have a representation that was based upon the population, and so the census was required. Now, that's what the history books say. The real reason that we have a census is so that you and I can go back and find our ancestors in the census records, because many communities did not have vital records. Birth and marriage records, death records weren't required in most communities until the early 20th century. And so without the census records, we would be in a world of hurt. And these census records now, for those of you who are or who are microfilm folks, these census records are now all digitized, which means that just on a keyboard, you can bring them up on your computer, and then you can print them. And for those of us who had to look at them in microfilm and handwrite down everything, this is just a miracle, just an absolute miracle. How many of you have Googled? Okay, so some of you have and some of you haven't. For those of you who haven't, you need to Google just so you can tell your kids and your grandkids that you've been out Google. This is like being able to magically ask any question in the world by putting in a term. Instead of actually saying the question, you put in a couple terms that related to the question. Let's say I was interested in John Couch genealogy. He was one of my wife's ancestors from the 1800s. And I could think about lots of things I'd like to know about John Couch. All I do now is on the computer, when I go to Google, I put John Couch genealogy, and out comes 100, at least 100 different opportunities for me to learn about John Couch. Now, some of them are in Arkansas, and I'm not really interested in Arkansas John Couches. I'm interested in South Carolina John Couches, but it's only, a blink. And I'm using I've kind of set the Arkansas ones aside, and I'm using the John Couch, and I'm seeing the work that other people have done. It's almost too much to describe what you're able to do just with a couple keystrokes on a keyboard. How many of you have typed? Okay, now I know there's a lot of hands who've typed. Let's see. How many of you drive? Okay. If you can type or drive, either one of those two things, It's the simplest thing in the world, with just a little bit of somebody showing you how to use the computer to do a Google search or to do an Ancestry.com search. Many people are afraid of the keyboard. In the Freedom Center, we do what we call personalized assistance. We expect that everybody who comes to the Freedom Center has never used either a computer or has done a family search, a genealogy search before. We assume that you don't know anything except you probably are carrying around the names of your parents and your grandparents and perhaps a great-grandparent or two. Or not. Sometimes we come to people who know their mother and they don't know their father. And we begin with wherever they are. And so we sit down at the computer, and for those of you who aren't keyboard comfortable, we'll sit at the keyboard and we'll show you how it's done. And if you keep coming back, at some point in time, you'll tell us to get out of the chair. You want to sit at the keyboard. It's a tremendous opportunity to see the power that exists now for you. And age is not a restriction. Anybody who can type. And if you can't, you sit there next to us and talk to us and share with us what you have. Now, just a couple things to give you an idea of what you can do with Ancestry.com. Anybody who you know who was alive in 1930, you can find their census record in about 5 minutes or less. And we can give you a printout. We can give you a big printout of it, we can give you a small printout of it. And then we go to 1920, the 1910, the 1900, you know we skip 1890 and we go to 1880. And sometimes it does get a little bit catchy because somebody moved and you didn't know it, and we're still searching in Tennessee. Well, now they're from North Carolina, but we catch on. Okay, we can't find them in Tennessee, let's look somewhere else. And because it's so fast, you know, you used to have to crank through those microfilms, and after you've gone, you spent 3 or 4 hours cranking through one county, you didn't want to try the county next to it, you were ready to go home. But now you're okay, you spent 5–10 minutes, you know, keyboarding through one county, okay, didn't find anybody, I guess I'll look at the next county, or didn't find them in the state, I guess I'll look in the next state. In the space of an hour, you've looked at the whole nation. So, if you haven't had that fun, I certainly invite you to come to the Buttermilk Pike Family History Center, or you could come to the Freedom Center. Again, if you're coming to the Freedom Center, it's good for you to make a reservation. If you're coming to the Buttermilk Pike, you can sometimes, if you haven't been to a Family History Center before, I suggest you call up and maybe ask them what's kind of a good time to come, because there are some peak times when the whole world comes. Maybe that's not the time you really want to come. You want to come when it's kind of a non-peak time. Today we were able to show a gentleman his grandfather's World War I draft registration, the actual image with his signature on it, because they've all been digitized. They've all been put into a computer and they've all been indexed. So all you do is put the name of a person and what state they were living in, and then it gives you anybody who matches. So I think in this case we were looking for Archibald Carter in New York. And so 5 or 6 Archibald Carters came up, and so we looked for the one that was born in, I think it was 1884, and there was only one. So we clicked on that person, and immediately, yep, that's it. And I said, well, how do you know that's it? Well, I can tell by where he's living. It's got his address on it. I can tell by, it had his wife's name in it. So it's just amazing. They also have birth, marriage, and death records. Some states now, again, are making their records available to actually putting them on a computer, and Ancestry has purchased rights or achieved rights to do that. So I was helping a gentleman in New Orleans several months ago, and we went down and a match came up, and I was really surprised because putting vital records on computers is really kind of relatively new. And okay, I was thinking, well, we're probably just going to find his name and maybe his birthday and things that we already know. Was I mistaken? It had his mother's name, it had his father's name, and even more importantly, it had the volume and the page number where the record came from. The volume and page number, guess what I did? I went to FamilySearch.org. I went to the library tab. I brought up the catalog. I went to Vital Records. I went to New Orleans, or Orleans County. I went to the Vital Records. I found the marriage records, and with that, with the date of the marriage or birth and the volume and record number, I found the film it was on. We ordered the film, and 2 weeks later, he had a copy of that record, the entire record. And more records are being brought online all the time. Okay. I think the other thing that I would share with you is, as much progress as has been made, we are only scratching the surface. There was a large national conference last week, and there was a speaker there from the L.D.S. church who shared some of the new things that the church is working on. I mentioned that there are 300,000 books in their library in Salt Lake City. They are now digitizing. They've created a software and a process by which they can take these books and actually make them available to you on computer with an every word search. So every single word that's in the book, you can search on. So you know some genealogies aren't just on one particular family. They go collateral families, and you have, a book can have 1,000 names in it. In many of the books, the indexes don't even have all the names that are actually in the book. This technology will allow you to search the book by every single name that's there. They've already completed 5,000 books, which is a fairly small number out of 300,000, but it's something that they've just begun. The church has historically embarked on many projects that take a very long time. I told you about the 1880 census being created. That took 14 years to do. There's a project called the Freedmen Bank Records. It took 11 years to do that. The church worked with the Ellis Island Foundation. That was, I think, a 10 or 15-year project to have all of those names indexed and cataloged. Their goal now is to take the 2.5 million rolls of microfilm and convert it so that you can look at it at home on your computers by just putting in a search name and perhaps a location or a date range and being able to bring that up. They figured that it's going to take them, and they've been working very seriously for the last couple of years on the technology to be able to do this. The technology existed, but it was so slow that it would take 20, 25 years to do that. So they've been working on the technology to be able to speed it up and to be able to achieve the quality, because many of the records that they microfilmed are very old, and so they had to have very sensitive equipment. And so now they've achieved a breakthrough in that they believe they'll be able to do the conversion of all the microfilm in the next 6 years. So it's a long time, but it's not that long. Now, that's just getting it so it's no longer microfilm based, but it's something that a computer can access. The other half of that is being able to index the records so that you and I can sit there and just plug in a name, bring right up and point to the one that we're interested in. The church has had about 20,000 people involved over the last 20 years or so in doing indexing projects such as the 1880 census and other sorts of projects. To be able to index the 2.5 million rolls is going to take a different magnitude of support. So at this conference, they were demonstrating the indexing software that they have created, that they were going to share with historical societies, genealogical societies, archives, states, foreign governments, people throughout the world who would want to be involved. Let's say the church has, well, the one that they demonstrated was some death records from the state of Georgia. Okay, so to index those, let's say there was the Georgia Genealogical Society or Historical Society wanted to take that on as a project. And they would work with the church to receive the software free to do that, and then to be able to set up a project that they could manage themselves to actually create the indexes that would then make those records available faster, sooner. And so they're really embarking the community of the world, if you will, to assist in creating the indexes for these records. The time will come when we can put in a name, and not only will it say that there's a census record here, but once we say, yes, that's our person in the census record, we'll be able to click and activate another click, and all the records that relate to that person will come to us. So the World War I draft registration will come to us, his birth, marriage, and death record will come to us, his obituary will come to us, his, any record that's there will come to us, because we will also have linked a person's entire set of records together, so when we find one, we'll get them all. Now, for some of us who enjoy the hunt of the search, that may not be such a good thing. But for many of us, we just want to know. It's not so much that we want to spend, eons of time searching to find that. So we have seen tremendous, huge progress just in the last 5 years, 5 or 10 years. And in the next 5 or 10 years, the change in technology is going to be our friend in helping us do even more in the world of genealogy. Well, it occurs to me that I've been talking for a while now, and I should probably settle down and see if you all have any questions you'd like to ask me. Yes, ma'am.
In addition to like birth and death records, do you do community, like city council minutes or county fiscal court minutes? Because they would have individuals mentioned in those.
Okay. Did everyone hear the question? Okay. Generally, no. Generally, the church focuses on the prime genealogical records. And they leave it to others to do those that are more governmental or municipal in nature. Not that there isn't genealogy value there, but it's not what they consider core of the sweet spot.
I see.
Okay, good question, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
What about cemetery records?
Yes, cemetery records, particularly in cooperation with historical societies and genealogical societies, that's been a real focus on many of those groups. And then the church has made those, has taken the transcripts of those and microfilmed them so that they could be available throughout the world. Yes, that's a very important opportunity. So if you have, and that would be an indexing opportunity as well. Okay. Yes, sir.
I was born in Pulaski County, and I found I had to look over those microfilms. Got so tired that I exhausted all my energy and left it.
I can relate to that.
Now what would I do?
But what we do is we go and we see what has been digitized for Pulaski. For instance, the Pulaski census records will all be online. And if you have somebody who's in a Pulaski census record, it's just a matter of typing their first and second name in and then putting Kentucky and Pulaski and search. And it'll come back and say, there were 12 John Campbells, that was the name you put in, and there were 12 of them, and here's when they were born, and here's what township in the county that they were living, and then you go look at the one that, sometimes you have to look at all 12, but many times you can use the process of elimination and say, no, that particular John Campbell's too young, that one's too old, and quickly. The other thing they've done now is they've started adding who was on the record with them. So you see John Campbell, you'll see his parents in the index as well, or you'll see who he's living with. You can immediately say, well, I don't want to look at that John Campbell because his father's Peter, but mine is Samuel. Oh, there's Samuel. And one click and you're at him. So I agree with you, microfilm was a very laborious, we were glad to have it back then. For those of you who've done it, you remember going through Soundex? Going through, okay, what's the Soundex for this particular name? That's ancient. We don't teach sound decks. The new people who come into genealogy, they don't have a clue what we're talking about if one of us old folks say sound decks, and they don't need to, because the search engine just does it for them. And now the search engine incorporates sound decks, so if you have a name that can be spelled 12 ways, it will come back and give you all 12 variations or possibilities. So you don't have to. Sometimes you have to. I had a situation where we were working today with a person named Reed, R-E-E-D was the last name, and we didn't get what we were looking for. And the person said, well, I'm sure he's in that state. And I said, okay, well, we'll just check this out and see, because I thought it should pick up an R-E-I-D spelling, because it's two vowels next to each other. I thought that would be the same Soundex code, but it wasn't. We put in R-E-I-D, and bingo, this person came right up. So sometimes when it doesn't happen, it's not like it's absolutely perfect, but you just kind of say, okay, how can I outfox this thing, and think how it, so yeah. You should come down to the Family Search Center or to the Buttermilk Pike. It's a new day. You'll like it. Yeah. Other questions?
You think they've got it off of that microfiche?
All the census records are on computer. There's not a single one that you have to use a microfilm for anymore. Now you can if you want. I mean, if you don't want to, but you don't. Every single one is in the computer.
Well, I know some counties in the state of Kentucky that were inundated with water,
right,
including the old Capitol building.
So you may not have access to the wills, to the estate papers, to the deeds and such, but the census records, except for 1890, since they're federal documents, regardless of what happened to the courthouse, you'll have access to the census records. Okay, here's the big test. Go ahead, another question.
One more question. I don't mean to take up time, but if you go back in history and you keep on going back, you find that somehow you didn't know the daddy, you knew the mother.
Yeah.
What do?
You follow the mother's line.
Follow the mother.
Well, I'm path of least resistance. Whichever line's the easiest is the one that I follow. I mean, I'm quite.
I can't hear you.
The path that's easiest, the family that you can get the most success on. Okay. You know, if I hit a brick wall, I just don't keep pounding. I'll go find another line, and then come back, and maybe I'll have another insight into how to follow the brick wall, or maybe new records will have been made available, or maybe I'll have connected with some cousin 3 times removed who had the family Bible that I didn't have access to. And it's a lot of fun many times to follow the maiden line. That's, in some respects, that's the more challenging line, because we know as women get married, they give up that maiden name. Well, they don't all now, but they used to, and so it's a challenge to follow the mother's line sometime, and very rewarding. So, many of us have this feeling that everybody else is an expert and we're not. I've been doing this for a long time, but I have a line that stops in 1840. That's my brick wall. I mean, that's the last real record I have on the person is in 1870. I just know he was 30 years old then, so I can say he was born about 1840. So we all have challenges that we stumble with, and that we wonder, why we can't get past. But then there's other lines that are a little bit more friendlier to us, and the records are more available, and so those are the lines to follow. But it's great because it's an enterprise that we can all start. If you haven't started yet, you know more about yourself than anybody else does. And that's where you start. You start with yourself. People come in and say, I'm related to Daniel Boone. Will you help me connect me to Daniel Boone? And we'll say, yeah, we'll start with yourself. And then we'll see who your father and mother are. Then we'll see who your grandparents are, and then your great-grandparents. And maybe we'll connect, hopefully we'll connect with Daniel Boone. But however, we'll be doing it step at a step time and systematically, and instead of, just you can go out on the internet and you can find all sorts of family histories that you look at them and you say, well, that was a leap of faith, but we can all get started, and it's just a ton of fun. We have people at the Family Search Center who cry. We have people who swear, actually. I'm not quite used to that, but they get so excited that they lose their presence, and favorite one of their words will come out. But you know they're excited, and it's really meaningful to them. We have men who can hardly talk. When they, a gentleman a couple weeks ago, when he saw the signature of his grandfather on the World War I, he knew he met this grandfather when he was a very young boy, and he was an older gentleman, and he could barely talk when he found it. It's a very important thing for us to know our roots and to know our families. One of the things that we're all pretty much 98% hold in common is our family, and our heritage is very important to us. Certainly in the L.D.S. church, the family is foremost. We believe very much in the family, in the sanctity of the family, and the relationships that we build here on earth, we believe can be continued in the next life. And that's why we have temples, and that's why we do family history work. Now, we know not everybody shares that belief with us, but we share all of our records with everybody. And so you should feel very welcome to come to a Family History Center or to a Family Search Center, and we would be just absolutely delighted to see you. Thank you very much. Oh, am I supposed to stay up there?
The society just asks a token that we give to our speakers in appreciation for your time
Wonderful.
and your information.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very much for
Appreciate it.
coming.
Thank you. It was a delight.
I assume he's answered all of your
Especially on
questions.
such short notice.
Yes,